Bienvenue sur le podcast pour un plein épanouissement affectif et cognitif. Chaque vendredi, vous pourrez vous enrichir avec l'expérience d'éducateurs au sens large qui cherchent à contribuer à ce plein épanouissement. Des professeurs des écoles, des éducateurs Montessori, des chercheurs, des formateurs et même des rééducateurs. J'ai à cœur que l'école évolue pour que chaque enfant puisse développer son plein potentiel. J'essaie de faire ma part avec mes ateliers Montessori, mes formations en ligne et en présentiel, le podcast bien sûr, et mes 2 cartons dans l'éducation nationale. Pour résumer, au quotidien, j'aide les enfants à développer leur plein potentiel et j'accompagne des professeurs des écoles pour leur faire découvrir l'éducation Montessori, qui est en parfaite cohérence, adéquation avec les recherches en neurosciences. Vous trouverez plus d'informations sur mon blog, montessori-apprendreautrement.com et plein d'autres ressources. Si vous voulez recevoir gratuitement les clés les plus efficaces pour développer le plein potentiel des enfants à l'école et à la maison, vous pouvez vous inscrire en cliquant sur le lien dans les notes de l'épisode. Pour passer à la vitesse supérieure, vous pouvez vous inscrire à ma formation en ligne ou en présentiel. Vous aurez toutes les informations sur le blog. Si ce podcast vous plaît, je compte sur vous pour laisser un commentaire sur votre plateforme d'écoute et une note de 5 étoiles si vous êtes sur Apple Podcast. C'est la meilleure solution pour donner de la visibilité au podcast et contribuer vous aussi à cette révolution éducative. Et n'hésitez pas à partager les épisodes qui vous plaisent. Après avoir interviewé Grégoire Borst la semaine dernière, j'ai échangé aujourd'hui avec Adele Diamond, une neuroscientifique de Vancouver. Je me suis préparée pendant plusieurs semaines pour cet épisode en anglais. Alors, si vous ne maîtrisez pas suffisamment l'anglais, j'espère que vous ne serez pas trop déçus et vous pouvez toujours écouter l'épisode en français avec Grégoire Borst. Je suis ravie de m'être lancé ce challenge et je ne suis pas encore bilingue, mais elle m'a compris, j'ai compris la plupart de ses réponses et j'espère qu'il en sera de même pour vous. Je laisse place à ma conversation avec Adele Diamond. Welcome, Adele. It's an honor to speak to you today. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good too. I would love to take just a few minutes to chat about your research. Why did you choose to focus on executive function?
I got into neuroscience because my advisor in graduate school, Jerry Kagan, was all excited about the changes in babies' behavior in the second half of the first year of life. He said babies all over the world show the same cognitive changes at roughly the same age. And he was so excited about the fact that this couldn't just be experience, because their experiences are too different all over the world. You know, there had to be a maturational component if this is happening at roughly the same time all over the world. And Jerry's jumping out of his seat. He's so excited. Well, obviously, the maturational component was going to be in the brain. And it turns out that one of the classic tests for studying babies' cognition is a test devised by Jean Piaget called A not B. It's a hiding task. And it turns out that that's exactly the same test, well, almost exactly, for studying the functions of prefrontal cortex in monkeys. It's called delayed response in neuroscience. So that gave me the idea that maybe the maturation that Jerry was interested in was in prefrontal cortex. And the cognitive functions that prefrontal cortex subserves are executive functions. So that is how I got involved in executive functions.
Okay. And what is your personal experience as a young learner and a thinker, and how did it influence your research?
Interesting. So I started out in anthropology and sociology. And anthropology has really influenced my work because I am interested in the qualitative aspects. I'm interested in seeing the behavior. A lot of people collect the data and just look at the numbers. They just look at the computer printout of the numbers. But my background in anthropology said, look at the behavior. Because if you look at the behavior, you'll learn much more than what the numbers can tell you. And that has really influenced my work, my research.
Mm. So let's dive into this idea of executive function. So much of your work is focused on executive function and why it is a critical factor in determining people's success in school and later on in life. Those core executive functions, would you like to describe what they are?
Yes, so there are 3 core executive functions. One is working memory, holding information in mind to work or play with it. Let's say you have a lot of errands to run today. And first you just think of them in the order you remember them. But now you want to think of the most efficient use of your time. How can I order my route of doing these errands so that I do it most quickly? If you do that in your head, it takes working memory. To think about the past or consider the future is working memory because you're doing it all in your head. To remember what I said earlier and relate it to what I'm saying now is working memory. So that's one. Then there's inhibitory control, which is a little more diverse than working memory. So it's things like thinking before you speak or act, catching yourself just before you do something you'd regret, like stepping off the curb when a car is coming. But it's also things like inhibiting distraction. So trying to focus in on what somebody's saying, even though maybe there's a lot of noise in the room. A lot of people working at home during the pandemic have had to use a lot of selective attention, especially when they're young children vying for their attention. And the third core executive function is cognitive flexibility. Being able to see things from different perspectives, being able to attack a problem from a different way of thinking, being able to find a way around a problem, being able to switch from maybe thinking about our differences to thinking about our similarities. So those are the three core executive functions. And from those planning and problem solving and reasoning are built, and they're higher level executive functions.
Okay. And what is the best way to understand executive function as it relates to educating our children and raising them to be independent and self-sufficient?
It's hard to think of any aspect of education or life that doesn't benefit from better executive functions. For example, you want children to stay in their seat and raise their hands. You don't want them to be taking things from other children or bothering other children. You want them to be able to focus on their schoolwork and complete an assignment, even though maybe it's boring or it's difficult or there are more fun things to do. I can't think of any aspect of life that executive functions wouldn't be beneficial for. It's beneficial for making friends and keeping friends, for marital harmony, for not getting in trouble with the law, for being able to think creatively in your job or in your life. There's nothing I can't think that wouldn't benefit from good executive functions.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about how working memory plays an important role in creativity.
Well, to be creative, you need to think of things in different ways. So you need to be able to play with them in your head, which is what working memory is about. So maybe I'll relate A, B, and C one way, and now I'm going to disassemble that and relate them a different way. In order to be creative, you need all three executive functions. You need working memory to be able to hold this in your head and play with it. You need inhibition so that you stop thinking about it the old way. You stop being stuck in the old way of thinking. You inhibit that and can go to new ways. And all of this is subserving cognitive flexibility, which is what creativity is all about, thinking outside the box. If somebody hasn't been able to solve this problem, how can we think about it in a new way, approach it in a new way so that we can solve it? That's what cognitive flexibility is all about.
So we don't just need working memory. We need all of them.
Yes.
Okay. And I heard in
another... Your English is excellent, by the way.
Oh, I try. I've been learning English for a year, just a year. And I heard in another podcast the importance of balancing the flexibility in the inhibitory control and focus. What do you mean by that?
Well, you can be so good at focusing on just looking for what you're planning to look for that you miss what's most important. So the example I gave was a study where they asked people to count the number of photos in a newspaper. Some people finished in a few seconds, others took minutes. And it's not that anybody was a faster counter than anybody else. The secret lay on page 2, where in big block letters it said, "Stop counting." There are 43 photos in this newspaper. But some people were so good at selectively attending only for images that they didn't pay any attention to the words. And many times we can think we know what's important, so we're only looking for that, and then we end up missing what is really most important.
Okay, and I know that so much of your work is about the value and the benefits of some of those lovely activities outside. Play, children engaging with nature. What are they learning through play?
You learn everything. Let's start with social dramatic play, like playing cops and robbers. Well, you have to remember what role you picked and what role your friends picked, right? So if you're planning the robbery, you don't want to accidentally tell the cop. That would be disastrous. You have to remember who has what role. And let's say you're doing a play about family and you pick the role of baby. You can't all of a sudden get up and drive the fancy family car. You have to stay in character. Babies can't drive. You have to inhibit that. And then your friends may take this scenario in ways you never imagined because you're doing it on the fly, right? You're just making it up. So you have to flexibly adjust to wherever your friends take it. It's challenging all 3 executive functions and you're having fun. Anything that involves sports, you have to flexibly adjust to what's happening on the field. You know, maybe somebody's in a position you didn't expect, or who knows what's happening on the field. You have to be attentive and you have to adjust. You have to remember the plays that you practiced. You have to inhibit maybe the temptation to want to make the goal yourself and instead pass it because that would be better for the team. All of these, you know, so many play activities require executive functions. Walking on a log in the woods, you have to pay attention and concentrate, otherwise you fall off. And being in nature and doing sports are also good for reducing stress. And stress is something that really disrupts executive function. So it's also wonderful to be in nature and to exercise because they help us de-stress. And that helps our executive functions.
And now moving on to storytelling. I know you are a huge fan of storytelling. Why?
Well, I love stories, but in terms of executive function, you have to hold everything in your head. You don't have the benefit of visual crutches like pictures on the page or puppets acting it out or video. It's just the storyteller and the person's voice. So you have to work to sustain your attention, and you have to hold in mind everything the storyteller's told you so far, so you can relate that to what the storyteller is telling you now. So it works executive functions much more than story reading, where you're looking at the pictures on the page. And in fact, somebody did his PhD comparing storytelling to story reading. And he found that memory and vocabulary improved more for the young children exposed to storytelling than the young children who got traditional story reading.
And how does executive function develop? You talked about play and sport and storytelling, but is there another way to develop executive function?
Yes. Almost any activity can develop executive functions if it's done in the right way, so it's challenging executive functions, and also so that the person doing it really wants to do it, really enjoys it, right? You can have the best activity for improving executive functions, and the person doesn't like it and doesn't want to do it. It's no good, right? They don't do it. They don't benefit. So you need something they like and that challenges executive functions. It could be piano playing. It could be cooking. It could be wilderness survival. It could be carpentry. It could be almost anything.
Okay. And I'm a big proponent of Montessori education, so I try to deploy it in a lot of schools by training teachers. How does a
Wonderful.
How does a Montessori prepared environment build executive function in a classroom for children aged 3 to 6?
Oh, so many ways. So first of all, for example, Montessori classrooms usually have one of any material. So if somebody else has the material that you want to use, you have to exercise patience. You have to inhibit the tendency to want to take it. You have to learn some self-control and self-regulation. Then the Montessori teacher will show you how to use certain materials, but you're the one who plans your day. You're the one who chooses what you're going to do. That's using the executive function of planning, which requires working memory, holding in mind what you learn, knowing what you can and cannot use. Just everything about the Montessori environment. For example, I also said the importance of reducing stress. And Montessori environments are all about compassion and kindness, grace and courtesy, helping one another, not embarrassing anyone. So the students aren't worried that the teacher might embarrass them today. It's about building community. It's about using your mind to come up with new ways of doing things. I love Montessori. It's everybody should all teachers should get trained in Montessori.
I agree. And maybe the lack of extrinsic rewards. There is no rewards.
Yes. There's so many aspects of Montessori that I love. So that's another. So the message of extrinsic rewards is that this thing I want you to do is not something you're going to enjoy enough that you'll do just because of the joy of it. So I have to give you an external reward to make you do it. Montessori says learning is fun in and of itself. We don't need any of these external rewards. We don't need any carrots and sticks. They're going to do it just for the sheer pleasure of doing it, because every child is motivated to learn and grow if you just let them. And also, it gets rid of the stress of grades. You don't have to worry about getting a bad grade because you're not going to get any grade.
Yeah. Yes, and a lot of French teachers haven't heard of executive function. If they don't know about it, they can try to improve them, why it's so important. How can we raise awareness?
Well, talk to the teachers where they are. Ask a teacher about his or her needs in the classroom, especially with young children. And many of their needs focus on the children being able to self-regulate better, being able to pay attention, being able to continue to work if the teacher has to go out for a minute. Once the children can work on their own or in small groups, then teachers can do what every teacher wants to do. They can give children individual attention. They can help Joey, and Sally isn't losing out because she's busy doing her own thing. They can observe and see what each child needs. Children can work at their own pace because let's say you're better at math than me. You can go way ahead in math. I can go way ahead in reading, and it doesn't matter because we're working on our own. You can work on what interests you today, and I can work on what interests me today. It's a win-win for everybody. So start with what teachers say they need and want in the classroom, and then how executive function addresses exactly that.
Great. And can we develop our executive function in adulthood? I guess it's never too late.
Yes, executive functions can be improved at any age, from babies through octogenarians, at any age. Let's see. You only improve on what you practice. So if you get computerized cognitive training and it trains only working memory, you're only going to improve on working memory. And you may only improve on exactly the working memory that you trained in the computer. It may not generalize even to other aspects, even within the narrow band of working memory. I think the biggest hurdle to improving executive functions later is our self-images. If you have already an image of yourself that I can't do this, I'm no good at self-control, I'm no good at paying attention, I'm no good at being a student, then it's very hard to change that. So I think neuroplasticity is no problem. The brain can change at any age. What's less plastic, I think, is our image of ourselves. And that's why I think it's important to get in there early and have children form good, healthy self-images.
We have to trust ourselves. We can do it, even if we are adult.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can do it at any age.
Okay. And what are the consequences in adulthood if you have poor executive function?
Well, let's say you're supposed to take certain meds every day. If you have poor executive function, you might forget to take them. Or you might not have the self-control to follow the regimen that the doctor gave you. You know, maybe the doctor said you have to lose weight. But if you don't have good self-control, it's hard to resist the chocolate ice cream, right? You need it for everything. I mean, imagine having to live with somebody who has terrible executive function. They're always losing their top. They fly off the handle at anything. They are inconsiderate. They don't remember what they said the other day or what you told them. What a pain in the neck. How much better to live with somebody who's able to remember, who's able to be considerate, who's able to flexibly adjust when you need a change.
Okay. Your explanation is so interesting. And can we use the metaphor of an air traffic control system to explain executive function? I've heard about it.
Yes, the Harvard Center has used that, Jack Shonkoff's Center of the Developing Child. So that works. Executive function is top-down control. So it's like the air traffic controller trying to manage things. So that works.
Okay. And children who are struggling with these capacities often look like they are not paying attention, right?
Yes, they often look like they're discipline problems, that they're intentionally misbehaving. And often, especially if they're young or they don't have good executive functions, it's not because they don't want to do the right thing. It's because they just can't do that yet. So, for example, in our experiments, you can see when we do card sorting, for example, that the child wants to get the answer right. Everything is telling you the child wants to get the answer right, but the child can't inhibit going back to the previously correct answer instead of the answer that's correct now. And, you know, so we have to appreciate that sometimes children are really, even we think, if a child knows what he or she should do and doesn't do it, obviously the child is intentionally misbehaving. But we have to remember that the child may know and remember what he should do, but not have the inhibitory control to do that. Maybe we can use the analogy again of dieting. I know I want to lose weight. I have an excellent memory of that. I have learned that I want to lose weight. But if I don't have the inhibitory control, I eat things that I shouldn't eat in dieting. It's not because I don't want to lose weight. It's not because I'm a bad person who's trying to defy the instruction to diet. It's because I don't have the good self-control. And that's so much more true of young children who don't have the self-control that we adults have.
I don't have a good inhibitory control right now with chocolate. And maybe there would be fewer children with ADHD if they had the opportunity to develop their executive function.
Yes. I think many children are diagnosed as having ADHD when they really don't, when they just have not developed their executive functions, their attention, their concentration, their working memory. And sometimes they're under stress now or were previously exposed to some severe stress. And what you're seeing is the effect of the stress when you see their poor attention or their poor working memory rather than ADHD. So I think many children are probably misdiagnosed as having ADHD. Also, if you expect a preschooler to sit still and listen to you lecture at him, many of the preschoolers, especially the little boys, are not going to be able to do that. And so sometimes they get misdiagnosed as having ADHD when they're just normal little boys who were never meant to sit still for any length of time.
Mm. And when do we begin to differentiate between the normal executive function delay that exists in the developing brain versus dysfunction?
Oh, that's a great question. Because children develop on at different rates. One child will walk, for example, at 9 months, and another child not till 15 months, and that's perfectly normal. By 2 years, you won't be able to tell the difference. So that's a very good question and a very hard question to answer. I think a lot of times it's a mismatch of the environment and the child. The child needs instruction in one way, and we're giving it in another way. And so many times children who aren't showing good executive function need a different approach, need us to use cognitive flexibility so that we can help the child in a different way and figure out how this child is going to be able to do that. Because many of us could succeed if it was only approached in a different way. Maybe you're a visual learner and I'm presenting it just by talking. Maybe you need to use your hands to learn it more. Maybe there are all kinds of differences among us. And one of the great challenges and great pleasures of teaching is to come up with the right way for the right student to make this happen.
Mm. So teachers should have a good executive function too.
Yes, teachers need to be little scientists, not little scientists. They need to be scientists because they're constantly hypothesis testing. What will work for this child? What does this child need? What's going on here? They're constantly testing hypotheses. So we really need to respect the intellectual demands on teachers. This is a very intellectually demanding career. And of course, it's also demands social emotional skills. You need to be caring. So we need to have much more respect for teachers. And at least in North America, we need to pay them much better.
Mm. And I think we can teach executive function skills in the course of doing academic subjects. We can work on executive function when we are doing math, literature, or science. But how? If it's not a Montessori school, how?
For example, in math, doing mental math is using working memory. So the more you have children do it in their head instead of on the calculator or writing it down on paper, the more you're taxing working memory. And Gregor's and Olivier's work has shown in many other instances of math, for example, let's see. If I give you a word problem where I say, well, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Olivier has many of these, where the words will make you think of doing one math calculation like addition, but what you really need to do is subtraction. You need inhibitory control not to get fooled by the wording and instead do what's really needed. But, for example, in reading, if you have one child read to another where the listener doesn't get to see the pictures on the page, that's essentially storytelling. And so storytelling, I just said, works working memory and concentration, focused attention. Almost every subject will benefit from cognitive flexibility and hypothesis testing. Okay, we just did this science experiment and it didn't work. How can we change the science experiment so it will work? It's easy to incorporate executive functions into academic subjects. And then you don't need to add yet another course in the curriculum, which is executive functions. But instead, executive functions are part and parcel of every course, math, science, phys ed, whatever.
I get it. And can you talk about Tools in the Mind, please?
Yes, Tools of the Mind is a program developed by Deborah Leong and Elena Botrova, which is based on the principles of Luria and Vygotsky. It is only for preschool and kindergarten. It emphasizes social dramatic play. It emphasizes socio-emotional skills just as much as cognitive ones. It's very similar to Montessori, excuse me, except that it's a little more teacher-directed. So they don't let each child work on what they want. They'll say, okay, we're all now going to work on reading, or we're all now going to work on math. But it's all about fun. It doesn't have external rewards. The teacher does what they call dynamic assessment, which is similar to Montessori observation, but a little more hands-on. So the teacher will actually give some hints to the child and see if she can get the child to the next level. Normal assessment looks at what the child can't do. At this given moment, what can the child do or not do? It's like dichotomous. But dynamic assessment is saying, okay, the child couldn't do this at this moment, but is he about to be able to do it? If we give just a little hint, can he do it? What kind of hint will help this child be able to do it? So it's looking at much more richly what the child is able to do than just dichotomous pass-fail. Let me think what else. It's about community, just like Montessori. The students help each other, the students work together. Yeah, I like it very much. I like it very much.
And what are the results? Are they learning better?
Yes, they learn writing much better because most preschool and kindergarten programs don't emphasize writing very much. And Tools actually teaches writing before reading. And the students get so excited about being able to communicate through the written word that they want to read, that they're begged to learn to read. So it's great for reading. It's great for writing. And we didn't find a difference in math in our study, but Clancy Blair found that it also helps math. And it definitely improves executive function. And if you can concentrate and pay attention and have the discipline to keep working, that's going to help in every academic subject.
It's great. Next week, I'm going to interview a woman about Tool of the Mind in French.
Excellent. Good.
And you said that stress is a real enemy of executive function, and we are in the middle of a global crisis. How can we manage our stress?
Go outside in nature if you can. A mindfulness practice is wonderful, even if it's just taking a few deep breaths. In fact, researchers have found that if students take just 3 deep breaths before an exam, it calms them down and they do better on the exam. So you don't have to do an elaborate meditation practice. You can just do simple mindfulness activities. One fun mindfulness activity that you can do with young children or people of any age is to buy bells, the old-fashioned bells with the handles. And everybody in the family has a bell. And you follow maybe the youngest child. It doesn't matter who you follow. The goal, though, is that nobody should make a sound with their bell. Oh, okay. That's a walking meditation exercise, but you present it as a game. Another way to calm down is hugging. I'm a great fan of hugging. their animals, pets, are a wonderful way to help us calm down. Research has shown that a dog in the classroom helps young children perform better because it helps them calm down. They're better able to pay attention. You might think the dog would be a distraction, but they're better able to pay attention if there's a dog in the classroom. So you can do very simple things to help yourself and others calm down. And we need that now. We definitely need that now because it's such an anxious time.
Yes. Thank you very much, Adele. It was so interesting. Do you want to add something before the end?
No, I think you did an excellent job. Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful for your expertise and for finding time to talk to me. I cannot tell you how happy that makes me, so thank you for being with me.
You're most welcome.
Si ce podcast vous a plu, je vous rappelle que je compte sur vous pour laisser un commentaire sur votre plateforme d'écoute et une note de 5 étoiles si vous êtes sur Apple Podcast. C'est la meilleure solution pour donner de la visibilité au podcast et contribuer vous aussi à cette révolution éducative. Et n'hésitez pas à partager les épisodes qui vous plaisent. À la semaine prochaine!